This video is sponsored by Audible. This July, Amazon Prime members can start an Audible membership and save 66% on their first 3 months. Visit audible.com/thedom or text the Dom to 500 500 to find out more and get started today. Hello my beautiful watchers, and welcome to the second of 3 episodes I'm doing to explore the many adaptations of the 1844 French novel The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. In the first episode, I gave as close to a full account of the book's rich backstory and plot as I could manage in a reasonably lengthy YouTube video, so if you've not seen it yet and would like some background information on the book before we begin, there's the thing. This installment is a quick breakdown of 5 of the most notable big screen adaptations of the past century, followed by me giving out imaginary awards to the films that I think handled the different elements of the book the best. The categories are going to be the most accurately adapted plot, D'Artagnan, Three Musketeers, Cardinal Richelieu, Milady de Winter, and then the best adaptation, and I will go into the twisted arbitrary logic behind my method of judgment later. Just an FYI, the 5 movies featured were nominated by my beloved patrons, so be warned, getting butthurt that I didn't include your favoritist is going to mean nothing to me. Also, just a quick word of warning, there is an act of sexual assault in the book where the lead character D'Artagnan uses deception to have sex with the antagonist Milady de Winter, and that is going to come up in this review along with me calling him exactly what he is for doing that. Please be prepared for this if that is a potential trigger for you. Okay, let's talk adaptations. While there are some adaptations that go as far back as the silent movie era, a lot of them have been lost to time now, and I decided it would probably act as an unfair limiter to how accurately they could adapt the book's plot anyway, so the first movie on this list is a 1935 production. Directed by Roland V. Lee and starring Walter Abel as D'Artagnan, Paul Lucas as Athos, Moroni Olsen as Porthos, Onslow Stevens as Aramis, Nigel de Bruyne as Cardinal Richelieu, Ian Keith as Rochefort, Margot Graham as Milady de Winter, and Heather Angel as Constance. This adaptation encompasses only the first half of the book, and while it sticks to the core of the story, it takes it upon itself to adjust certain details. They kept true to D'Artagnan's father sending him to Paris to become a musketeer under the command of Captain de Treville, him getting a crack on the head for picking a fight with the Count de Rochefort along the way, on his first day in the city accepting challenges to duel with the 3 inseparable musketeers, their duels being interrupted by a squad of the Cardinal's men who they fight and defeat together, D'Artagnan falling for Constance and through her getting involved in an affair between the English Duke of Buckingham and the Queen of France, and as a result volunteering to retrieve some diamonds that she gave him as she needs them back to stop the affair from being revealed by the Cardinal. The 3 musketeers going with him, but all of them having to remain behind at some point on the journey. It was mentioned that the musketeers are using pseudonyms, though there's less hints about the seriousness of the need for the inseparables to hide their old identities than there was in the book. In a lot of small ways, D'Artagnan is made more traditionally heroic, first and foremost the omission of him being a rapist. Indeed, he rejects the fake affections of Milady de Winter outright, being true of heart and loyal to his beloved Constance. The 3 musketeers are likewise improved, as, though they do abuse their power here and there, it is nowhere near the level of amorality of their book counterparts. The absence of Porthos manipulating married women's emotions for fiscal reward in particular was notable. They also changed it so Bonacieux only really had himself to blame for getting thrown in jail, as he went to snitch to the authorities about seeing Buckingham and the Queen together, allowing them to skip over the part where he begs D'Artagnan for help and is rejected and instantly forgotten about. Constance is also Bonacieux's young ward instead of his wife, so D'Artagnan is no longer pursuing a married woman. She also escapes an untimely death at the hands of Milady at the end, which is nice for her. Milady herself absolves the musketeers of the need to condemn her to death by conveniently committing suicide as soon as her plans are foiled. The film does, however, accurately adapt D'Artagnan's consistent amused bullying of his servant Planchet. In this interpretation, the Cardinal Richelieu is still politically conniving, but the Count de Rochefort is upgraded to the main villain of the story, creating a new subplot where he attempts to overthrow both the Cardinal and the King using a secret treaty with England that promised half of France to them if they supported his schemes. Like I said, the film does an okay job of sticking to the book's plot until about halfway through the story, where instead of going to England to meet Buckingham, D'Artagnan runs into Milady arriving back in France to deliver the newly stolen Queen's diamonds to Rochefort. She kidnaps D'Artagnan, but they happen to stop by the inn that the 3 musketeers were staying at, and Athos recognizes Milady, so they rescue the lad, find Rochefort's secret treaty on her, and return to Paris to dramatically expose the Count to the surprise of the King and Cardinal. The King is so impressed he promotes D'Artagnan to full musketeer, and the 4 of them presumably serve as his personal bodyguards together. I'd say this film probably picked the better half of the story to adapt, and did an admirable job of making the heroes less bad. It's a bit goofy, but the book wasn't super serious all the way through either, so all in all, I'd say this was an okay, if super incomplete, adaptation. Next, let's take a look at the Three Musketeers from 1948, directed by George Sidney and starring Gene Kelly as D'Artagnan, Van Heflin as Athos, Gig Young as Porthos, Robert Coote as Aramis, Vincent Price as Richelieu, Lana Turner as Milady de Winter, June Allyson as Constance, and a small but masterfully acted role for Angela Lansbury as Queen Anne. This adaptation is a more complete recreation of the book's story, though it still, through necessity, leaves out a fair share of the book's 700 pages. It does, however, include D'Artagnan's father sending him to Paris on an embarrassing horse, the bonk on the head, meeting de Treville, accidentally getting into duels with the three inseparables, the duels being interrupted, forging a friendship between the four men instead, D'Artagnan falling for Constance and, as a result, getting caught up in the affair between the Queen and the Duke of Buckingham, and agreeing to go to England to get her diamonds back from him when Richelieu finds out that she gave them to her sweetheart. His three compatriots going with him, but all of them getting waylaid one by one, D-Dog making it to England and Buckingham, noticing that two of the diamonds have been stolen by Milady, having replacements made in record time. D'Artagnan returning to France just in time to help his queen save face, Constance getting kidnapped by Richelieu, and D'Artagnan being reunited with his three friends. Things get a little more sketchy at this point, not completely off the rails, but there is a notable shift away from the book. Unfortunately, this film tried to have its cake and eat it when it came to D'Artagnan sexually assaulting Milady de Winter. He does indeed have sex with her under false pretenses, using her maid Kitty to convince her that he is her crush, the Count de Ward, but the film takes the time to establish that this was not his intention going into the situation, as he was grudgingly forcing himself to take part in this deception in order to find out where Constance was being held prisoner, and he would have just talked to her if Milady hadn't thrown herself on him, which is what caused him to fall in love with her. I personally don't think this is enough to make the situation not super distasteful, but I can sympathise with the position the film was put in by the book. It clearly wanted to stay as loyal to the original plot as possible, but also didn't want its audience to hate the protagonist. Milady murdering Constance and the Duke of Buckingham does take place in this film, but in a very different circumstance. In this version of the story, instead of sending Constance to hide in a convent, the Queen sent her to England to be protected by Buckingham. When Milady is outed and arrested, Buckingham has what he thinks is the bright idea to make Constance her head guard, as she would be immune to her seductions. However, she is easily manipulated by her via other means, resulting in Milady stabbing her fatally and escaping to assassinate the Duke personally. This film didn't shy away from the fact that the heroes appointed themselves judge and jury for Milady when they finally caught up with her, or the way that she begged for mercy in vain, though I personally think film Athos seemed way more cut up about it than he was in the book. The conclusion of the story is the same in spirit, if not quite in detail. The Musketeers are ambushed and taken by force by a large group of Richelieu's guard, and unlike his book predecessor, D'Artagnan does use the incriminating letter that Athos took from Milady to force him to reward, not punish them for their crimes or face exposure. The three go off to do what they did in the book, Aramis to his monastery, Porthos to an affluent widow, and it seems the filmmakers shared my theory that Athos reclaimed his old title and lands. D'Artagnan's ending is slightly different, as he's sent to England to try to negotiate an end to hostilities instead of being promoted to lieutenant, but it's close enough. This adaptation also greatly improved on the Musketeers by omitting many of their acts of unnecessary violence and murder, and toning down their hedonistic lifestyles whenever it wasn't strictly relevant to the plot. Ian Keith actually reprised his role as Rochefort in this movie, but unlike the 1935 adaptation, his part in the story was played down so much it was virtually non-existent. Richelieu is restored to his rightful place as the true mastermind behind most of the protagonist's troubles, and true to the book, he is so powerful in his position, the possibility of the Musketeers touching him in any way at the end is laughable. Interestingly, in this version of the story, Richelieu is the Prime Minister of France instead of a cardinal, or at least he is never directly referred to as such. There was apparently some concern that portraying a prominent religious figure as a Machiavellian villain would upset Catholic audiences. Possibly for a similar reason, the war in this version of the story seems to strictly be between France and England instead of a French rebellion instigated by religious strife. This film also includes D'Artagnan being something of a dick to Planchet, however there's an added redemption moment for their relationship towards the end, as he says that he trusts him explicitly as a friend to carry the message of warning to the Duke. This film had some tonal issues resulting from them introducing a fair amount of slapstick comedy and acrobatics, but still including the really heavy stuff in the book like the murder of Constance and the merciless execution of Milady. Just as an added tidbit, the very first thing I noticed about this movie was, Gene Kelly is so not 20 here. But still, all in all, I would say that this film is worthy of its reputation of being one of the best Three Musketeers films from both standalone merits and adaptation perspectives. Skipping ahead a few decades, we have the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers from 1973 and 1974 respectively. This could be considered cheating as it is multiple movies, but I decided it counted because it was originally conceived as being one really long film but was split into two at the last minute. It was directed by Richard Lester and starred Michael York as D'Artagnan, Oliver Reed as Athos, Frank Finlay as Porthos, Richard Chamberlain as Aramis, Charlton Heston as Cardinal Richelieu, Christopher Lee as Rochefort, Faye Dunaway as Milady de Winter, and Raquel Welch as Constance. I think I need to give slightly more backstory to this film to explain it. Believe it or not, it was originally written with the Beatles in mind to play the four leads, though to my everlasting disappointment that idea fell through. Another amusing bit of trivia is no one in the know took it upon themselves to inform the cast that they were planning to do two movies, apparently announcing the sequel and their involvement in it at the premiere of the first installment, resulting in some rather angry lawsuits and a new clause in the Screen Actors Guild named after the producer that stipulated that you need to be a little bit more honest about this shit in the future. I have to say, these films stick to an impressive amount of book story beats. D'Artagnan getting whammied by Rochefort's lackeys on his way to Paris to become a musketeer on his father's orders, ending up in duels with the Three Musketeers after meeting de Treville, the interruption to said duels and the fight that cemented their friendships, hiring Planchet, renting a room from Bonacieux, and Constance, who for once is his wife, the Cardinal brainwashing Bonacieux to spy on his wife for him, the Duke of Buckingham and the Queen having their sneaky meeting, the gift of the diamonds, the Cardinal trying to use this to ruin the Queen, D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos and Aramis heading to London to get the diamonds back, but all three of the latter not making it, the Duke realizing that he's 2 diamonds short thanks to Milady de Winter and having new ones made super fast, D'Artagnan racing back and getting them to the Queen just in time to embarrass the Cardinal. Happy-ish ending, next movie. Constance getting kidnapped, D-Dog getting distracted from rescuing her by getting the hots for Milady instead, Kitty trying to warn him that she's really not that into him, and overhearing that Milady has plans to get her real boyfriend to off him. In stark contrast to its eggshells walking predecessor, this film includes the Siege of La Rochelle and even pokes fun at the absurdity of religious wars. Also included is the part where the 4 men defend a tower from counterattack while having breakfast and talking about the conversation they just overheard at the inn between the Cardinal and Milady, with all that business with the hit being put on the Duke of Buckingham and the license to kill that changes hands immediately. The English getting tipped off, Milady getting arrested but finishing her Duke-slaying mission by manipulating her guard, then returning to France to kill Constance too. D'Artagnan and the three deciding that that was quite enough of that, thank you very much, and putting her on an unofficial trial before having her executed. The Cardinal being pretty pissed off about this, but recognizing that D'Artagnan could cause serious issues for him with what he knows, so choosing to offer him a promotion instead. D'Artagnan attempting to hand the reward off to each of his friends, but each turning him down for reasons that are pretty close to the book. There are quite a few small book accuracies that I really appreciated here. This film is the only adaptation I've seen that was honest about the reason that Porthos didn't make it to England, i.e. not because he made a heroic sacrifice, but because he got into a super pointless duel with a rando and lost. It's also unique in that it remembered the diamond ring that the Queen of France gave to D'Artagnan as a thank you. Unfortunately, a lot of this is a good on paper sort of situation, because as long as the list of book loyalties is, you have to balance it against the liberties it took with both the details and the tone. Very much like the 1948 production, this film's major deviations from the book's plot are to allow for the introduction of more action scenes and slapstick humor, though it seems to me it does appear to be attempting to outdo its predecessor in both, and suffers from even greater tonal issues when they go back to the darker elements of the original story as a result. All of the protagonists are notably more silly, and D'Artagnan in particular appears to be a complete country bumpkin, a naive, simple-minded comic relief character without a drop of noble blood in him. Constance, usually a somewhat tragic figure, is now a disaster magnet, and her romance with D'Artagnan appears to have taken on a somewhat adorkable feel as a result, which again really does make retaining her book-accurate death seem like a bit of a messed up choice in what is otherwise basically a full-on comedy movie. These films take every opportunity to add in more action scenes, including having D'Artagnan and the Musketeers coming to the rescue of the Duke of Buckingham when he's caught with the Queen, a fight with the palace guards as he tries to get her diamonds back to her, a scene during the Siege of La Rochelle where they actually rescue Rochefort, and a climactic battle with Rochefort and his men as they attempt to rescue Constance. This version drops the Count de Ward and uses Rochefort to fill in his parts of the story, both in D'Artagnan wounding him to get his pass to travel across the Channel and being Milady de Winter's real crush. They drop the D-man being a straight-up rapist, choosing instead to make him a total man-whore. He immediately seduces Constance when she comes to him for help after the guards arrest her husband, then later when Kitty informs him that Milady doesn't love him, he bonks her first, then literally gets dressed, walks into the other room and bonks Milady. Scummy as fuck and lacking basic human decency, but at least consensual. In the book, Cardinal Richelieu orders Milady to cut 2 diamonds from the Duke's clothes while dancing with him at a ball. In the 1948 version, it's sort of hinted at that she might have stolen them after sleeping with the Duke, but this film goes right ahead and confirms that Buckingham lost his rocks while getting his... well, you get the idea. This is a subjective complaint, but I really didn't think the humour in this version landed nearly as well as the others. It was just something about the combination of the directing, the amateur-sounding Foley work, and the way that the film went long periods without a score, especially during the action scenes, that made the whole thing just seem awkward and impossible to enjoy for me. I don't know at what stage of the process this bright idea was formed, but at some point or another, probably during editing, someone decided that there should never be a moment's quiet in this entire film, so there's a constant, badly integrated background chatter from everyone on screen. So, final thoughts on this one is a reiteration that it is a good on paper adaptation if you take into account that it's a full-on comedy now, and you can ignore lame shit like the Duke of Buckingham experimenting with a submarine in a scene that serves no purpose in the plot. Like I said, I didn't personally find any of it very funny. Other people might, but I think we can all agree it would have been truly awesome if it really had starred the Beatles. Moving on to the one I'm sure you've all been waiting for, the Disney production from 1993, directed by Stephen Herrick and starring Chris O'Donnell as D'Artagnan, Kiefer Sutherland as Athos, Oliver Platt as Porthos, Charlie Sheen as Aramis, Tim Curry as Cardinal Richelieu, Michael Wincott as Rochefort, Rebecca de Maurier as Milady de Winter, and Julie Delpy as Constance. This is the first in-name only adaptation of the episode, or possibly to be more precise, if it is an adaptation at all, it is not of this book, it's of this one. The only things I can definitely say that Disney took from Dumas' book are the names of the characters, the most basic, vaguest framework of the setting, and the singular plot point that D'Artagnan ended up accepting challenges to duels with all three Musketeers on his first day in Paris, but they got interrupted by Richelieu's men before any of them could kill his punk ass. In this story, Cardinal Richelieu is a one-dimensional, mustache-twirling classic evil villain intent on murdering King Louis and claiming the throne of France for himself. He's basically Cardinal Jafar. They borrowed the idea of a secret alliance with England from the 1935 version, though this time it's Richelieu himself who's behind it, and the Duke of Buckingham, instead of being the Queen's secret lover, is apparently the Cardinal's equivalent in England and his potential co-conspirator. D'Artagnan also has a slightly adjusted backstory that, in true Disney fashion, now involves a dead father. He's now joining the Musketeers to follow in his father's footsteps and redeem his family name, as his dad apparently died failing to save the previous king from being assassinated. I don't remember that being mentioned in the novel. Let me check the history books. Huh. Well, touché, Disney, I'll give you that one. Right at the start of the film, as part of the Cardinal's naughty schemes, he has the Musketeers disbanded, but Athos, Porthos, and Aramis refuse and become outlaws instead, Robin Hood style. Via their interrupted dueling, D'Artagnan gets involved, hears the Cardinal's plans with Milady before getting rescued by the Musketeers, the four of them stop Milady and get the treaty, find out that Richelieu plans to JFK the king on his birthday, reform the Musketeers, who can apparently infer a lot of instructions from a single note with their motto on it, storm the castle, and rescue the king. During all this, D'Artagnan and Rochefort have this whole thing about his sword, then right at the end, Pirate Rochefort reveals that he was the one who killed Big D's dad, and they duke it out. Oh, and there's a recurring joke about Paul McGann following D'Artagnan around and ineffectively trying to get revenge on him for bonking his sister and being high-pitched.
Let's get you, D'Artagnan!
Constance is now a lady-in-waiting who becomes infatuated with D'Artagnan after a 30-second meeting, and aside from that and tossing him his sword right at the end, she has zero part in the story. Milady, my favourite character from the book, gets kind of screwed over by this film in my opinion. She certainly acts cool, but she doesn't really do anything. She falls in with D'Artagnan's plot because she finds him unconscious by the side of the road and is like, ooh, a lost teenager, put my super important mission on hold and bring him to my boudoir, then like the very next day gets captured by Athos. Again, following in the 1935 version's footsteps, she spares the heroes the moral ambiguity of killing her by jumping from a high place to her doom. King Louis XIII has been aged down quite considerably in this version, and the film plays up a genuine romance angle between him and Queen Anne in blatant defiance of their miserable, loveless marriage in the book. Unless I missed when they mentioned it, it seems the Musketeers are no longer working under fake names. Milady called Athos Athos, so I guess the dude's mother named him after a mountain. There's no sign of D'Itreville, Planchet, or Belessieux in this story, unless they're one of the many potential background characters. I couldn't really count him as a book accuracy, but I do get a kick out of the fact that this is the only adaptation I've seen so far that included Lord de Winter, Milady's brother-in-law. They don't really introduce him or explain him in any way, he just turns up 2/3 of the way through the story bent on revenge, like he's a crossover from another movie. The accents in this are super hilarious. Half the cast is American, half is English, and there is one solitary person in all of France with a French accent, which just makes it all the more confusing. I swear I'm trying really hard to resent resent this movie for being such a crap adaptation, but it's just so fun and silly, I can't do it. Totally off topic, but a quick respectful shout out to Swordmaster Bob Anderson here, playing the King's fencing instructor. He was an Olympic fencer who went on to become a sword fight trainer and choreographer, and was responsible for some of the most iconic sword fights of movie history. And finally, the Three Musketeers from 2011, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and starring Logan Lerman as D'Artagnan, Matthew McFadden as Athos, Ray Stevenson as Porthos, Luke Evans as Aramis, Christoph Waltz as Cardinal Richelieu, Mads Mikkelsen as Rochefort, Mila Jovovich as Milady de Winter, and Gabriella Wilde as Constance. Also, this movie cast Orlando Bloom as the Duke of Buckingham. Yes, there are two movies that star both Orlando Bloom and Luke Evans, despite how confusingly similar they look. The only reason I can come up with for this film to exist is sometime in the late 2000s, someone saw the 1993 version and said, "Pfft, you call that silly? We'll show you silly." Another in-name-only adaptation, and one that's not even trying to pretend it's got anything to do with Dumas' book or real-life historical events. The whole movie is a bit steampunk, if you'll excuse the use of that word to describe out-of-time fictional technology entirely devoid of steam. The only things I can in good faith compare to the book are D'Artagnan, newly arrived in Paris on his father's advice to join the Musketeers, pissing off Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, and arranging soon-to-be interrupted duels with them, getting sent to England to get some diamonds back for the Queen, and the letter the Cardinal wrote for Milady confirming that the bearer is working for him. Because they didn't kill off D'Artagnan Sr., and they actually included the diamond mission to England, even if it's objectively a completely different diamond mission to England, this still technically puts it ahead of the 1993 version for including parts of the book. Obviously, I'm not saying that outweighs the fucking airships and makes it a better adaptation, but still, pretty funny. In this version, Athos, Porthos, Aramis, and Milady are a ninja assassin and espionage team who travel the world doing France's wet work. After successfully stealing Leonardo da Vinci's plans for a flying boat from the Italian government, they are betrayed by Milady, who gives the plans to her new employer, the evil English Duke of Buckingham. As a result of this failure, the Musketeers fall out of favour with the government and are put in semi-retirement. As I said, Percy Jackson, D'Artagnan follows his original story for a little bit, but once he falls in with the Musketeers, he also basically becomes a completely new character. Most notably, he seems to have taken on some of the tropes of the slouching, unwilling hero and has to basically be promised sexual reward by his crush before he'll take on the Queen's mission. Said mission comes about because Richelieu is pissed off that the Queen is trying to help the King grow a backbone, and the Duke of Buckingham seems intent on waging war with France using his new flying warships and, in general, throws far too much shade on people for his own good. So, the Cardinal tries to discredit the Duke in the eyes of England and the Queen in the eyes of France by framing both of them for an affair with the other. He has Milady ninja her way into the Queen's bedroom to plant fake letters and steal the diamonds that she apparently hides behind a wall of invisible razor wires. She then takes them to Britain to plant them on Buckingham. Before she goes, she demands a letter from him confirming that she is acting on his orders, which he grudgingly writes for her. Constance talks D'Artagnan and the Musketeers into helping the Queen. They sail to England, steal the Duke's airship, and use it to bombard his castle. Milady escaped ahead of time because she knew her old team would pull some shit like this, but Athos predicted this and had their servant Planchet pretend to be her coach driver in order to capture her. Milady, in a seeming act of contrition for her betrayal, gives Athos the Cardinal's letter and spares him the need to execute her by walking the plank and falling into the channel. Rochefort ambushes them on the way back with the Cardinal's much bigger and cooler airship, and there's a climactic battle that results in both ships crashing into Notre Dame Cathedral. Yikes, seeing that get damaged isn't a fun joke that aged well. Cool, leather-clad D'Artagnan kills Rochefort in a dramatic rooftop duel, and they fly their badly damaged airship to the King's Palace, where Athos uses the Cardinal's letter to force him to pretend that Rochefort was a traitor and they had brought him to justice by his orders. Milady comes to on the Duke of Buckingham's warship, revealing that he is following close behind the Musketeers with a fleet of sea and airships. Clearly the intention was to put a little question mark next to the end, but the film, while not a total flop, didn't do nearly well enough to warrant a sequel. Honestly, the parts of this film that aren't off the walls insane seem to me to be as much of a product of the films that came before it as an adaptation of the original book. It starts with D'Artagnan's former musketeer father giving him one last lesson in swordplay before sending him to Paris and teaching him a secret attack just like in the 1973 film, though unlike that film, this one kinda forgets to bring that back at any point. I assume inspired by the 1993 version, they appear to have expanded on the idea that Buckingham could be a villain of the story, Constance's new position as a lady-in-waiting, and a much younger than the book's king being hopelessly in love with his arranged marriage bride, but too awkward to show it. A lot of films have played around with the exact reasons that D'Artagnan ends up in his duels with the three, but I have to say, a dispute over Aramis giving him a fucking parking ticket has got to take the award for the silliest. This is the first version I've seen where D'Artagnan demands duels with 2 of them instead of just accepting them from all 3. As you can see, Rochefort is missing his whole eyeball again. I really don't think depth perception is as optional in fencing as these films seem to assume it is. Everything is dialed up to 100 in this version, so the 4 heroes face a tiny army of Cardinal's guards when their duel is interrupted, but they are so overpowered they don't have to expend much energy in defeating them. This is the first adaptation I've ever seen that makes the Cardinal a skilled swordsman, which I thought had the potential to be interesting, but this also never comes back for the rest of the film. It was good to see Planchet making a return to the story, though de Treville and Bonacieux are still MIA. I couldn't help but notice that the 4 heroes in this film have way more in common with the A-Team than Dumas' Three Musketeers. Ah yes, Athos loves it when a plan comes together. Once again, I find myself struggling to resent this movie too much, this time because it is so far off the rails of sanity, saying, but it's not following the book's plot seems like a highly redundant complaint. They were pretty clear in their advertising that this is what they were about too, so I can't really accuse it of trying to capitalize on misleading the book's fanbase either. Plus, I'm pretty sure the peak of this book's popularity was several hundred years ago. It's never going to hold the same place in my heart as the 1993 version though, because while it was also silly and reasonably fun, it's let down by some unfortunate CGI, some pretty lackluster acting, and just a lot of small things like the setups that never came back, and some badly thought out lines like Athos complaining that there's no wars for them to fight in currently, while the entire intro to the movie was about how France is currently at war with everyone. Briefly returning to the 21st century for a moment, I'd like to tell you about the special offer that Audible is running in July 2019. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get 66% off your first 3 months of membership, so you're basically getting 3 months for the price of 1. This comes with a monthly credit that you can use to acquire an audiobook of your choice for free from Audible's unmatched library. There's no commitment, you can stop anytime you like, but you get to retain your titles regardless of your membership status. If you are interested in the Three Musketeers, then your cup runneth over, because not only does Audible have this book, it has multiple options for narrators, all of whom are much better at pronouncing the French names than me. Alternatively, if you'd like to know why I felt inclined to name my cat Sir Terry Pratchett, you can get unabridged recordings of his Discworld series. If you've never read a Terry Pratchett book, I will go ahead and say you are welcome in advance for this recommendation, because they are life-changingly good. Picking you up was a terrible idea. It's going to take hours to get your fur off this costume. On top of all of this, members also get 2 Audible originals each month. If that appeals, then there's a link in the video description, or you can go to audible.com/thedom or text the Dom to 500 500. Getting back to the review, but immediately going off on a slight tangent, I was pleased to see some examples of the pseudo-evolution of traits across multiple adaptations or genres that I once wrote a disastrous essay on regarding vampires. Just as a small example, in 1973, or possibly sooner if I missed one, someone decided to give Rochefort a whole missing eye instead of just a scar, and obviously it got a good audience reaction because from then on, all the Rocheforts started sporting fashionable eye patches on their face. Rochefort is undoubtedly forever doomed to just one eyeball, I fear. You can't fight this sort of evolution in film. Back to talking adaptation, it seems that there is one plot beat that is immortal through every reincarnation of this story, and that is that D'Artagnan gets into duels with all 3 of the Inseparables on his first day in Paris, but said duels always get interrupted by Richelieu's men. It doesn't matter if the adaptation is black or white or in colour, it doesn't matter if it was made in the 20th or 21st century, it doesn't matter if it's got flying frigates in it. Upon his arrival in the capital, D'Artagnan always ends up getting wrapped up in 3 duels with Athos, Porthos and Aramis, and those duels never take place because some fools try to arrest them. I was so sure that Milady's death was equally integral to even the most inaccurate adaptation, but the bloody 2011 version had to go and ruin that at the last minute by bringing her back for the stupid sequel bait. On the opposite end of things, a change that I can confidently say is included in every adaptation is that the Musketeers are always made more traditionally heroic. Even in the versions where they maintain their decadent off-time activities, they still leave out the worst of their crimes and abusive behaviour towards their social lessers. I'm of mixed feelings in regards to this. Obviously it makes them less accurate to the book, but making me not hate the leads is a hard thing to complain about. Other minor constant occurrences include never going with the original ending of D'Artagnan fully giving himself over to the judgment of the Cardinal, but impressing him into showing mercy by sacrificing the one thing he could have used as leverage. On the occasions that Richelieu isn't given the full arsehole makeover, his carte blanche letter to Milady is always used as said leverage. Even if the 1974 D'Artagnan was too dumb to realise he was going to need witnesses there for it to work. Just before moving on to to the awards, a quick shout out to the adaptations that were highly requested by my patrons, but I couldn't really justify seriously entering into the running. D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers, a joint Spanish and Japanese cartoon that ran from 1981 to 1982. Weirdly, the D'Artagnan pun is actually in the show, but the Musketeers are referred to as the Musketeers. Aimed at young children and armed with an offensively catchy theme tune, D'Artagnan follows a surprising amount of Dumas' story beats in between a lot of added content to stretch out the runtime and make it more child-friendly. Mickey, Donald, Goofy, the Three Musketeers, a Disney animated movie from 2004, disqualified surprisingly not because it stars a mouse, a duck and a dog, but because it's not technically an adaptation. It's an original story set in a bizarre blending of Dumas and Disney's universes. D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos and Aramis do exist in this world, but they're not the main characters and the Disney boys aren't playing them. I hope this D'Artagnan isn't a rapist. Interestingly, while multiple adaptations decided to demonize the Duke of Buckingham, this story is the only one I've found that based its plot around a what if Captain de Treville, or at least a stand-in for him, was the villain of the piece. Barbie and the Three Musketeers, a 2009 direct-to-DVD affair that's not really anything to do with the actual Three Musketeers as far as I can deduce, but a story about 4 other aspiring musketeers set around the same time period. Kelly Sheridan plays Barbie, playing a girl named Corinne D'Artagnan who wants to be a musketeer, but she can't because she's a girl, but she and her friends train in secret and end up saving a prince's life, and then they do get to be musketeers, and also there's a cat who sword fights. Aside from deeming it not even an attempt at an adaptation, I'm going to go ahead and bow out of passing judgment on this one, as I am clearly pretty far removed from this film's target audience. That said, I do appreciate that Tim Curry voices the Richelieu stand-in antagonist in this.
I never asked to be King Philippe.
Which makes it all the more reason!
Okay, finally onto the awards. I do want to stress that winning and losing here is not a reflection of these actors' talents. While their ability to convey a character convincingly is a factor, a lot of what they're going to be judged for is story adaptation related stuff that was entirely out of their hands. Let's start with plot accuracy. How well did the films hold true to the story of the book? Obviously we can write off 1999 and 2011 right away, and while the 1935 version did a good job with the half of the book it did include, I think the missing second half kind of disqualifies it from this category. Defining the parameters here was a big hurdle because what I choose to define as accuracy changes who wins the category. If it was simply the film that has the most plot beats taken directly from the book, the 1973-74 productions would easily take the lead, but if you factor in off-book additions and tangents away from the original plot, I think that kind of drags them down enough to put them on par with the 1948 film. So yeah, I guess I have to call this one a tie. You know, things were so much easier back when I first started on YouTube and I had the ego to proclaim that everything that wasn't directly in the text of the book could be deemed an inaccuracy. Next, let's take a look at the leading man boy, the character so famous he occupies a fantastically bigger spot in history than the real-life historical figure who inspired him. Which film best represented Dumas' D'Artagnan? I'm going to be considering a combination of character traits, personal role in the plot, and well, D-Dog didn't really have an arc, but whatever can be considered his personal journey. Possibly surprisingly, I've decided that Chris O'Donnell and Logan Lerman are not necessarily immediately out of the running for this award. Though their movie plots were in name only, the characters themselves are sufficiently douchey and full of themselves to be dislikable, just like Book D'Artagnan, and these are the only 2 actors on the list who have a fighting chance of looking age-appropriate for the role. Walter Abel suffers for his production only covering the first half of the book, but still did a pretty good job of recreating D'Artagnan's confrontational nature, his habit of being a dick to Planchet, his immediate infatuation with Constance, and his willingness to throw himself into whatever quest he's currently on with a possibly unhealthy tenacity. Gene Kelly can boast an impressive loyalty to D'Artagnan's actions, but suffers a bit for being just too damn likeable to be the self-obsessed amoral wanker of the book. And Michael York nails D'Artagnan's carefree lack of conscience, but is far too simple-minded, friendly, and polite to people, and reflective of my issues with the 1973 film as a whole, his D'Artagnan is often more about being the butt of bad jokes than being an accurate adaptation of the guy from the book. So I guess this award goes to none of them. None of them are accurate enough to the book to win. All of these filmmakers just couldn't resist the urge to improve the Gascon to the point where I don't consider any of them the same character. As far as I'm aware, we have never had a truly book-accurate adaptation of D'Artagnan, which I am personally okay with because I kind of hate D'Artagnan. Moving on to the titular Three Musketeers, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. There's nothing super wrong with the 1935 Musketeers, but neither are they particularly memorable, the victims of the film deciding to concentrate more exclusively on D'Artagnan and his its interactions with other characters. The 1948 version remembered all the essentials, including that the book concentrated on Athos a little more than the other two. Like most adaptations, they're made less amoral, but the film does include some instances of them being total douchebags to the common folk. The 1973 versions of them, like everything else in those movies, have the advantage of their films being very book accurate, but the disadvantage of them needing to make all the good guys really silly to fit the film's comedy. The 1993 version is alone in all incarnations of the Musketeers to have neglected to stay loyal to the three main distinguishing features of said Musketeers: Athos's heavy drinking, Porthos's vanity, and Aramis's religious leanings. Only Aramis's thing made it in, as Porthos is more of a general party boy pirate in this, and Athos appears to be too dark and brooding to be shit-faced all the time. Even the 2011 film included this, and it had fucking rapid-fire cannons and a crank-operated flamethrower. That said, that is just about all the three from 2011 had in common with the book, so I think we can well and truly consider them out of this running too. All in all, I think this one has to go to the 1973 Musketeers. The film showcased their bravery and skill, but also included more of a warts-and-all portrayal of their self-obsessed decadence and less than noble behaviour in their personal time than any of the others. They're not spot on to Dumas' boys, but they are the closest in my opinion. But where would any Three Musketeers story be without its statesman, religious leader, puppet master, and badass in red? It's Cardinal Richelieu. I just don't think that Nigel de Boulle can take this title because he turned out to be Rochefort's patsy, which I personally consider to be the most disrespectful thing you could do to a mastermind like the Cardinal. Christoph Waltz is probably out too because his Richelieu was just a bit too evil and an annoyed, power-hungry underling instead of the de facto ruler of France like he should have been. And let's face it, Tim Curry was basically playing Tim Curry dressed in a fabulous red cloak. Once again, I find myself torn over the winner because of the different ways you could judge a character as an adaptation, making it a really close run thing between Vincent Price and Charlton Heston. I have to admit I was mildly perturbed that a film would cast Charlton Heston in this role if they had access to Christopher Lee, but that is both subjective and not super relevant, I guess. I think that Lee takes it in the end by a very narrow margin. While Heston's film probably contains numerically more book-accurate plot beats for this character, he also spends a good deal of time off-book doing weird and unnecessary things like being a dick to Rochefort. Lee's Richelieu was almost as plot-accurate even with half as many films to work with, and I think he did a better job of recreating the air of master manipulator who was equally graceful in victory and defeat. Like I said, it was a very close thing, but this is my choice. Next we have Milady de Winter, who most resembled the international secret agent, assassin, and femme fatale of the book. Margot Graham's Milady was pretty good at being deceptive like her written original, but I think having her kill herself at the end flies in the face of Milady's burning desire to live at any cost and demonstrated belief that her death would be an injustice. Lana Turner's version is pretty book accurate for most of the way through. The only major deviation is her shanking Buckingham herself instead of getting her corrupted guard to do it, and honestly to me that's not too bad, as she did demonstrate in the book that she was okay with doing her own dirty work if she needed to, and it is in keeping with her trait of always getting the job done. Faye Dunaway is especially accurate to the book's plot, aside from that really weird moment when she's ambushed in London by Native Americans. Anyway, she's one of the stronger contenders from the 1974 film because their need to make most characters slapstick buffoons fortunately did not extend to her. Rebecca de Maurier seems to be doing the best she can with the role, but as I mentioned, the character ends up being all bark and no bite in the end. Nothing she did in the book is included. There's no diamonds to steal, no invading dukes to assassinate, and Constance lives in this version as well. She had one job and she got distracted from it because she wanted to bang Batman's sidekick. While Mila Jovovich also has book Milady's ability to get shit done no matter what, she does it with a combination of gymnastics and martial arts instead of cunning and wiles, so I guess I have to take away book accuracy points for that. It seems that once again this is coming down to a photo finish between the 1948 and 1973 versions, and once again I think the earlier adaptation takes it. Lana Turner just had a slightly better balance of plot and character accuracy. And finally, which is the best adaptation, and what the fuck does best adaptation even entail? Well, on this show it means which film created the best combination of legitimately good film and loyalty to the spirit of the book, if perhaps not the exact letter of the book. Just as an example, the last time I did an award show like this, I gave the best adaptation to The Muppets Christmas Carol because, even though Bob Cratchit was played by a frog, I thought the film captured the joyous experience that Charles Dickens was trying to convey better than any other incarnation. I think that the 1935 movie was a genuine attempt at a good adaptation, but by changing the villain and halving the story, the filmmakers put too much of their own spin on Dumas' tale to be considered the best. I have to confess that the 1948 1948 film did successfully charm me a bit, making it a strong contender. However, it forced me to consider things like exactly how important is it to the story that Richelieu is a cardinal, and how much physical humour can you add before it starts subtracting from book accuracy. The 1973 and 4 movies took their fair share of the accuracy awards, but like I said, that won't necessarily translate into being the best adaptation. You could make the case that although the 1993 version is an adaptation in name only, it is undeniably an exciting swashbuckling tale. The themes the original book worked very hard to sell itself on, so it has the potential to be the best adaptation of the book's heart, if not its everything else. The 2011 film is not the best adaptation. I personally found it a reasonably harmless movie, but I'm not even going to pretend to argue that it might be the best interpretation of the Three Musketeers. I wasn't joking, you know, I really did consider choosing the Disney movie, but even with the description of best adaptation being quite vague, it still has the word adaptation in it, so I think the win has to go to the 1948 production. This film showed a healthy respect for its book forefather, while also recognizing what elements of it might sour the experience for their audience and what changes were necessary to make the tale engaging for people of a different century than it was originally written for. So, there you have it. Now, I am aware that my lack of love for this book might have tainted all the decisions made in this review, so if you are a fan and would have come to a different conclusion, you are invited to try to change my mind in the comments. If you agree with my decisions, you can tell me about that too, because, well, I like reading about being right. Thank you for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Please do not forget that while the YouTube algorithm is technically just a string of numbers, it sure as fuck acts like it's a beast from the pits of hell that hates us and wants us to burn. So, doing things that appease it, like subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video would be greatly appreciated. Please do join me for the final episode, where I'll be taking a more detailed look at one adaptation in particular, one that did not feature on this list, and I can almost guarantee no one will be able to guess the identity of without hints. See you soon. Much love and appreciation to my patrons of honour, Aaron G. Dunsill, Sasha I. Edwards, and Shelby Holtz. Hello again, my beautiful watchers. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick reminder that there's a wonderful website called Patreon that's been allowing online producers to actually make a living doing what they do, since apparently YouTube's decided that they shouldn't anymore. Basically, they offer the chance to pledge a certain amount of money per month or per video in exchange for various rewards offered by the creator. There's a variety of stuff you can earn by becoming one of my patrons, including early access to all videos and taking part in that survey you see at the start of every Lost in Adaptation episode. That's actually a very important part of the process, as I use it to gauge how much I'm going to need to explain about the book and the film before I start comparing them. If you decide to become a higher level contributor, your name will be added to the credits that you're seeing right now, and you'll be given the option to join my private chat room so you can regularly talk with me and other patrons. If you're keen enough to join the topmost tier of patronage, you'll earn the most coveted of all the rewards, the chance to pick a future adaptation to be reviewed by yours truly. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that. According to the rather unusual laws of my country, I must defeat several alligators in Mortal Kombat before I'm legally allowed to support online content, and I'm afraid my reptilian martial arts are just not what they used to be. Fear not, it would still be a huge help to me if you were to give that like button the old clickaroo, share this episode on social media with perhaps a little recommendation to your friends to check it out, and subscribe if you've not already. It really helps my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. I hope you have a most pleasant day, and I will see you in the next episode. You can get unabridged recordings of his Discworld series. Do you mind, buddy? You mind? I'm trying to earn my sponsorship. If you're interested in the Three Musketeers, then your cup runneth over, but flies in the face of Milady's burning desire to live at any cost, and demonstration, monsieur. This book is telling me French.